What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network, and this is our wide receiver 2 fantasy preview episode for 2023. Here to break it down with me, one of the top fantasy football rankers in the game, the odds maker, Sean Kerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? I'm just happy we finally got DeAndre Hopkins clarity and just in time for today's pod. So I'm stoked about that.
Yeah, that was kind of just like a dark cloud over some of the wide receiver situations in the league. But yeah, we'll talk about that. He is still in that wide receiver 2 range in terms of ADP. So we'll kind of talk about where we're ranking him. We'll go through every wide receiver in that range. And then next episode, we'll talk about all of the wide receiver 3s and beyond, guys we like outside that range as well. But let's jump into it here with the wide receiver 13 by ADP. And we're using a best ball ADP over the past couple of weeks to try to get the most recent ADP. Obviously, depending on what site you're on, that could change. But DeVonta Smith is the wide receiver 13 for us here. And I guess my question to you is, any room to kind of grow on this ADP with AJ Brown still there in Philly? They weren't a super pass heavy team. They could throw a little more next year, but just your thoughts on kind of Smith's ceiling at wide receiver 13.
Yeah, to be honest, probably not much room to grow from here. He was the wide receiver 10 last year, but taken in context, he played all 17 games. So that's why I tend to look at points per game, and he was wide receiver 17. And we have to remember he benefited from Dallas Goedert being out weeks 11 through 15. He was the wide receiver 10 during that stretch. Another quirky thing about his season last year is 2 of his 400-plus yard games last year came in the 2 games started by Gardner Minshew. And I always said that, whenever Minshew's under center, it's going to probably raise DeVonta Smith's projection. That just proved it last year. So he's probably going a tad early. I mean, he's very talented, obviously. But, the limitations of the offense with Jalen Hurts just scrambling a lot, they're going to be winning a lot of games. They won't need to throw as much, and he has to compete with A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. This is probably closer to his ceiling. I do have him right around here. He's my wide receiver 14, but he's not a guy I'm just racing to get. But if he falls to me in drafts, I'll gladly take him. But this does feel closer to his ceiling.
Yeah, I don't think he has a massive room to improve at this ADP. Yeah. But, and you kind of mentioned it with Dallas Goedert there. 4 of his 5 lowest scores of the year came in the games Goddard played as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But, and we should probably start before we go to the remainder of these wide receivers, just kind of how are you valuing the wide receiver 2 position as a whole? Because personally, I'm valuing it pretty high this year. Even if, for example, I say, hey, there's a guy like Deebo Samuel, maybe I have him 2 spots below where his ADP is, I still want at least one guy, if not 2, from this tier, because I think the tier drop after about the top 30 or so is a little bit steeper than it has been in recent years. So I'm still loading up on wide receiver here. But how are you kind of evaluating, the wide receiver 2 position as a whole?
Oh, for sure. Similar. If you look at my overall top 150, like the first 12 are like all receivers. I think it's critical to get your first receiver early, like in round 1. And then round 2, it's like all running backs. That's typically, like I've said, that you get Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. And then round 3, it's all receivers again. I think it's absolutely critical. The receivers we're going to talk about today, I'm pretty much in line with ADP. I don't have many like that are way too high or way too low. And that's where I think people can maybe get complacent at the position. I think it is absolutely critical to come away after this tiers off the board with 2 or maybe 3 wide receivers, because it does fall off, considerably after that, like after the wide receiver 36 range. So I think it's critical to get them. This is also the range where you'll see people maybe take a quarterback, which again, this year I can't fault them, or a Mark Andrews type, or, start hitting on the RB2 tier. But overall, I'm with you. I think this is still the range where I'm going to be targeting a receiver and try to have at least 2 once this tier's off the board.
Yeah, exactly. Because you look at this tier and DeVonta Smith goes around, pick about 25, 26 overall. And then the last guy we're going to talk about, the wide receiver 24, is Christian Watson. He goes about pick number 56. So, within that range, 26 to 56, essentially if in a 12-team league, that's going to be what, the 3rd to the 5th round.
Yep.
I want receivers in most of those spots. Maybe there'll be a quarterback or a tight end I'll make an exception for. But generally speaking, I'm looking at receivers in those spots, because when you compare these guys to the running backs in that range, I just think that there's running backs, after pick 56 and well into the, 60s, 70s, 80s that aren't that different from the running backs going, the running back 2s going in that range. Whereas at wide receiver, as I mentioned, it really starts to fall off a cliff very quickly. It's after, I would say, about the top 32, 33 guys at wide receiver. So that's kind of, I just wanted to put that out there for people because like you said, I don't think the ADPs for any of these guys are massively off. We'll talk about some of the risk factors for each of these guys, but overall, I still think that, we should be drafting from this tier aggressively. With that being said, Chris Olave is the number 14 wide receiver, age 23 season, entering year 2, 26.5% target per route rate in his rookie year. That was excellent. I guess, what are you kind of looking at for Olave going from year 1 to year 2? And if Michael Thomas is healthy, who's the number 1 receiver?
Ooh, that's a good question. I still think it's Olave. I mean, I thought he'd be good last year, but not that good. Like, I was just surprised how good he looked as a rookie. So, it's fair to assume he's going to take, a leap in year 2 as well. So it's scary to think how good he'll be this year. But like you mentioned, he benefited from Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry missing a ton of time last year. So I think with Michael Thomas in the mix, he's certainly going to eat in his target share. I think when both are healthy, I think Olave is the better receiver. And I still think he'll be the number 1 target. He saw a ton of targets downfield last year. 54% were catchable. Derek Carr, he's not the greatest downfield thrower, but he had a 56% catch ball rate, 20 yards plus downfield. So if anything, it might be a slight upgrade or a neutral QB change for Olave. So I think he'll continue to put up, solid wide receiver 2 numbers. I think at the end of the day, his closing rank on the season will come down to how many games was Michael Thomas healthy for. I think it really comes down to that. If Michael Thomas plays all 17 games, Olave is probably going too high. But again, I probably wouldn't bet on Michael Thomas playing all 17 games at this point. So that's why I do have Olave right in this range. But as long as Thomas is healthy, I think Olave will be, more of a mid-range wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I have Olave a couple. I think I have him number 18, so I do have him a couple spots down. But that is because I can't just project Michael Thomas for 3 games.
Yeah, exactly.
like he played last year. I do think it's like you have to kind of balance out, guys going from year 1 to year 2, especially guys who were drafted on day 1 or day 2 and had successful rookie years. They tend to make another leap, from year 1 to year 2, but there's also the uncertainty of, how much is Thomas going to play, the uncertainty of how is Derek Carr going to look, because Andy Dalton actually had a very good season last year. So I would say it's probably more likely than not that Carr is not an improvement. It's more that he's going to be either kind of the same or a little bit worse. And then, it just also comes down to Olave, if he gets hit in the head again, I also do worry. I think he's one of those guys where he's like a bigger concussion risk than most guys. So that's something else, but that's why I have him a couple spots down. But as I said, I'm still drafting guys, like I'm still drafting Olave over all the running backs going in this tier. but I do have him a couple of spots lower than consensus ADP in terms of the wide receiver ranks.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Who would you rather have, Olave or Keenan Allen? I guess we can answer that in a few minutes, but would you rather have?
Yeah, I would still rather have Keenan. You know,
the
he's just been
of it.
So consistent, and like, you know, we've talked about this. I think the Chargers are going to be one of the fastest paced teams in the league, whereas the Saints, you know, they like to run a little more. There's just a lot more uncertainty because of how the Saints play. You know, the Taysom Hill factor, you know, whether Michael Thomas stays healthy, the fact that they like to run it a little bit more. So yeah, that's really all it is. It's just kind of managing the risk reward. But as you mentioned, I mean, I don't know, like Olave had such a good rookie year in terms of like the target rate and things like that. The yards per route was 2.4. It's really hard to improve upon that too. So yeah, he's a great player. But as far as this year, yeah, there's just a couple of guys that I'd rather have. DK Metcalf is the wide receiver 15 in ADP. He's going on to his age 26 season, year 5 in the league. You know, last season it was him and Tyler Lockett pretty much even, but Metcalf does go considerably higher than Lockett. What are your thoughts on him at this price at wide receiver 15?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys where we know what we're getting from Metcalf at this point, and he's still only 25 years old, probably hasn't even peaked yet. And last year, you know, I was a little bit down on him because I didn't think Geno Smith was going to turn out to be an upgrade over Russell Wilson, but that's exactly what happened. And, you know, one of those reasons is Geno was just great on deep passes last year. He had the 5th highest catchable rate on passes 20 plus yards downfield, first in on target rate. So that's excellent for DK Metcalf. You know, when it comes to entering Jackson Smith-Njigba into the target pecking order, it could eat into DK's target share a little bit, but it could also draw some attention away from defenses with Metcalf. So, you know, it's going to ding Metcalf a little bit, but maybe not enough to really lower him on my ranking. So I have DK as the wide receiver 15. I think this is about right. However, I do think the gap between Metcalf and Lockett isn't as big as the ADP would suggest. So when it comes to Seattle wide receivers, I think I'd rather wait and take Lockett, you know, several rounds later. But I think where Metcalf is going, you know, he still has a massive ceiling. I think wide receiver 15 is about right.
Yeah, like I agree. I think Lockett is the guy that should be higher, but I'm not really fading Metcalf for any reason. You know, it's just
right.
it's just I'm just kind of going after Lockett pretty hard. You know, I think he's the wide receiver 32, so I have him like 6 spots. I think it's 6 spots higher than that. But as far as Metcalf, you know, very durable, hasn't missed a game yet in his career, which I think is promising. And yeah, he's entering his prime. Wide receivers usually, you know, you can expect in their age 26 seasons, age 26 to 27 is usually when they peak. So, you know, we probably haven't seen the ceiling for DK Metcalf. I mean, he had 1,300 yards in year 2, and he hasn't matched that the last couple of years. They've been targeting him a little closer to the line of scrimmage, which probably has helped his consistency. But I do think he has a monster season in him. And I don't really think it's, you know, like anything is too different from last year outside of Smith-Njigba. But that should just, you know, if anything, that should, you know, hurt the tight ends a little bit more. And like you said, just kind of help the defenses stay honest. So no real worries about Metcalf here at this spot. Again, I just think, you know, compared to the running backs you could take in this range, I mean, DK Metcalf, I think the floor is considerably higher. All right, let's go to the 16th wide receiver by ADP over the last couple of weeks. That's Deebo Samuel. He suffered a pretty big decline in 2022. The average depth to target went down from about 8.5 the year before to about 4.5 last year. The targets per route were down about 1%, 24 to 23. The yards per route went from 3 to 1.7. So just not as much of an outlier year from Deebo last year. How are you pegging him for this year?
You know, he's still one of the best players in the league. Don't get me wrong, but just in terms of fantasy, it's hard to project him higher than this with Christian McCaffrey in this offense, just because, you know, they operate in the similar areas of the field. It's also, lessen the need to give Deebo, direct handoffs. The glory days of Deebo were 2021 when he was racking up 5 to 8 rush attempts a game and getting touchdowns, So his role is going to change a bit with McCaffrey there. After McCaffrey became a full-time player in week 8, Deebo ranked wide receiver 33 in points per game the rest of the way. So that's kind of just, the Christian McCaffrey impact that we saw off the bat. Plus, they also have Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle commanding their targets. The Niners, will have plenty of leading game scripts and be a run-heavy team. So I think Deebo is just going to be extremely inconsistent for wide receiver 2. So at the end of the year, he might put up wide receiver 16 numbers. I think you're going to be disappointed because he's going to put up a lot more duds than other guys in this range, like your boy Keenan Allen coming up. So I'd rather just have a guy that's going to give me steady wide receiver 2 production in this range than somebody that's going to go off one week and then maybe put up a dud the other, just because there's too many mouths to feed in this offense right now. And Deebo's impacted by that. So while at the end of the day, my projection's right in this range, he's a guy I'm probably not taking here.
Yeah, I have him a couple spots lower, wide receiver 19. I do think that they're, with McCaffrey, with Kittle, with Ayuk, who's still ascending as well.
Yeah.
There are just a lot of mouths to feed. There's still quarterback questions. You're probably not going to need to give him as many handoffs with McCaffrey here. Yep. And, even Mitchell, I mean, he's been missing half the season his first 2 years. If he plays a more normal amount of games, the need to give Deebo handoffs really considerably shrinks. So again, still a guy, I'd rather have a guy in this range than a bunch of running backs. But yeah, there are some guys I would take over him. And Keenan Allen going here at wide receiver 17 is one of them. He's averaged 6+ catches, 70+ yards every season since 2017. And this is just a model of consistency, still one of the best route runners in the league. And I think, he's still their high volume target. Like Quentin Johnston, Mike Williams, they do different things on the field, but I still think Keenan Allen's going to be that high volume, short to intermediate range target for Justin Herbert, who is entering his prime. And Allen's still 31. It's not like he's, super old or anything like that. So yeah, I have Allen ranked a couple spots higher. I would take, I have him at wide receiver 14. And, I've said this all off season. Like, I think he's being slept on. What do you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. He's as reliable as it gets. He might be showing signs of decline at 31, but last year he didn't show any. And like you said, he's just a great route runner. So, Father Time might take a slower time to really have Keenan decline. And last year, even though he missed a ton of time, he was still a low end wide receiver 1 in the games he was healthy. So I feel like his ADP is people saying he's a lock to miss more games than other receivers in this range. And I don't think that's the case. Injuries are pretty random. Last year he had some bad luck, but he's 100% going in the season. So getting him in this range, knowing, week in, week out, you're going to get solid wide receiver 2 production. He's the type of guy I want to target in this range. And then later on, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, that's when I like to hit home runs and maybe bank on a little bit more upside and volatility. But this range, yeah, sign me up for Keenan Allen.
Yeah. And, like Allen, he's one of those few guys I would say, like, we look at Allen compared to a guy like Deebo, who's, I just don't think there's still like a range of outcomes where Deebo is the overall wide receiver 1. Whereas if Keenan Allen, like if the Chargers are the fastest paced team in the league, let's say Herbert leads the league in attempts, like there's a shot Keenan Allen could be the overall wide receiver 1 and still not knock down anybody else on the team in terms of their cut into anyone else. So I don't see that for a guy like Deebo, probably not a guy like DeVonta Smith or even Olave. So, there are some of these guys here where I still think Allen, especially in a full PPR format, has considerable upside. The floor is still there. You're just getting a discount because he missed some games last year. Wide receiver 18 is Amari Cooper. He's only 29, even though he's entering year 9. He was pretty effective with Deshaun Watson, averaged about 9.5 yards per target. So that was good to see. About 8.5 with Brissett. What are your thoughts on Cooper in his second year with the Browns.
Yeah, no, I do like him here. He's still only, it seems like he's been around forever, but he's still only 28 years old, still, tail end of his prime. And last year, he just saw a massive target share. His 39% team air yards was the 6th highest in the league. This is a very top heavy offense. However, he should see more target competition with Elijah Moore coming to town, but that could be offset if Deshaun Watson bounces back to, his Texans days form. There could just be more passing yards to go around. So that's why, I still like Cooper this year, even with Elijah Moore there. Also, he's one of the players that with DeAndre Hopkins officially signing in Tennessee, that helps me pick Cooper here, because there was a time, maybe it was a few weeks ago, where the Browns looked like a contender to get him. Those odds had died down, but still just having that clarity helps, because, he would have been, closer to a, low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 if they got Hopkins. But having that clarity just makes me like Cooper in this range even more. Again, you're going to have, high weekly floor, high weekly ceiling with a guy like Cooper. So he's the kind of guy I do like drafting in this range.
Yeah, I totally agree about Hopkins. I think that was a concern, because Hopkins could come in here and, ostensibly be the top target over Cooper. Yep. But, Cooper's been extremely consistent in 7 of his 9 years. He's posted 1,000 or more yards, which also tells you he doesn't really miss a bunch of games ever. And yeah, I still think, there's still a lot of question marks at receiver, behind him. Like, yes, in theory, Elijah Moore should be better and help him out. But, Elijah Moore's no sure thing either. So I still think Cooper's going to be the unquestioned number 1 wide receiver here in Cleveland. So yeah, can't really, nothing really to complain about with this ADP here. And I do think Deshaun Watson takes a step forward, because if you look at Watson, he played well with the guys who are going to be getting the most snaps for Cleveland this year. And the guys he was struggling to throw to were the guys that probably aren't going to play very much this year. So I like Cooper here. Jerry Jeudy is the wide receiver 19. He's only, he's going to his age 24 season, even though this is his 4th year in the league. This is one, there's a lot of question marks here. I mean, how does Russell Wilson rebound? How does Sean Payton, come in here, change the role for Jeudy, who had his best success, I think, as an X receiver in the couple of games Courtland Sutton missed last year. What do you think of Jerry Jeudy going here as a top 20 wideout?
Yeah, I mean, despite Russell Wilson's struggles last year, he still finished wide receiver 18, which is right in this range. He's only 24 years old, still entering his prime. And, he should face more target competition this year with Tim Patrick, possibly rookie Marvin Mims. The Broncos really didn't have a number 3 wide receiver at all last season. So that could knock Jeudy's target share down a bit, but I'm not too concerned with it. The only thing with him is he still sits atop a pretty massive wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 tier, where you can get a guy like Lockett or Brandon Ayuk that I'm projecting similarly a round or 2 later. So sometimes in this range, I might get cute and try to get Justin Fields or another running back or maybe a tight end. So this is a range where I'm pretty flexible, knowing that I can get a similar receiver, a round or 2 later. But, overall, I think Jeudy, he's ranked about right here. It just depends on your draft strategy and what you're trying to do. But if you're at a spot where you need a receiver and he's sitting there, absolutely take him. I think he could blow up this year with Sean Payton there, and Russell Wilson can't get worse than last year. So, Judy's the kind of guy where I pivot depending on, how the first several rounds went for me.
Yeah, I do see a little bit of risk here. I have him wide receiver 22, so I'm a little bit lower. First of all, Greg Dulcich missed the first handful of games last year.
Yeah.
Judy's biggest games came with Sutton out. So there are some things where I think Judy's the best receiver of the Denver wide receivers, but with a new offense, new coach, new coordinator, all that stuff, I do think there's some uncertainty as to how exactly everything shakes out. And, there's a chance that, there's a chance Sutton rebounds, there's a chance Patrick rebounds, there's a chance Mims is better than we think. Dulcich could take a leap forward. So I do think Jeudy is still the best receiver here, but, does he kind of does he just blow everyone out the water to where he's a top 20 guy? I don't know. I mean, his targets per route in his 3 seasons was always between 21 and 22%. So, if he doesn't really increase on that, I think he's going to fall just short of the top 20, honestly. But I do think the floor is a little higher than the ceiling for Jeudy. So yeah, he's a guy that there are a couple guys I think I would rather have over him, in this tier. The next guy up is Calvin Ridley. He's the wide receiver 20. He's going on his age 29 season this year. Obviously, was suspended last year for the gambling. So we really haven't seen him on the Jaguars. We haven't seen him play in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So how are you projecting him? Because when he was playing, he was one of the best receivers in the game. And that was even with, at the beginning of his career, even with Julio Jones there in Atlanta. So how are you kind of projecting Ridley here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, well, yeah, first of all, it's a great landing spot for him. I mean, he gets paired with a, generational talent about to enter his prime in Trevor Lawrence. Unfortunately, the market's pretty sharp here. He should be a fringe top 20 wide receiver because he's not coming back from a season-long injury where he tore multiple ligaments in his knee. I mean, he was just betting on parlays. Give me a break. So, I mean, he's going to be 100% healthy, ready to go. While he might be 29 and on start to decline, he hasn't been getting hit the past couple of years. So I think, we should be treating him like he's still in his prime. So there's a ton of upside in taking him here. However, he does have a wider range of outcomes just because there's a chance he doesn't return to his 2020 Falcons form. So there is a little bit of mystery in that because, like you said, we haven't seen him play in a couple of years. But I think just based on the upside for him as a talent and in this offense, wide receiver 20 does make a ton of sense. Similar to Metcalf, though, where I think the gap between Ridley and Kirk is similar to, Metcalf and Lockett. I think that Christian Kirk is probably the better value you can get a little bit later on. But again, the upside with Ridley is undeniable. So if you take him at wide receiver, I can't fault you. Just know he does have a lower floor than most guys in this range just because we're kind of guessing that he's going to be the same type of player we saw at the Falcons a couple years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Kirk and Ridley pretty even.
That's what I'm saying, like dead even, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of tough to say, Ridley is a great pick here just because I think you can get Kirk a little later, and this is a little different from Seattle where we've kind of seen it play out. It's like, this one is, and Ridley's actually entering his age 29 season. I mean, he's on the other side of, his prime now. Now he hasn't played in a while, so it's not like he has like a lot of tread on the tires or anything, but I similar to Jeudy, I do, and Zay Jones is playing well as well. So, similar to Jeudy, I do see a little bit of downside with Ridley, compared to some of these other guys. Again, still taking him over running backs, but not necessarily my favorite wide receiver in this tier, just because of the uncertainty. But the upside is there. Trevor Lawrence is entering his prime, so and there's a good chance he still is the number one receiver. But there's some risk as well. 21 is DeAndre Hopkins, age 31 season, 11th in the league. I guess what are you expecting here with Tennessee? How's your projection looking for him now that we know where he landed?
To be fair, this seems like a below average landing spot, just because the Titans are such a run heavy team. But however, the plus side of this is he will be the unquestioned number one target, at least in this offense. So he's going to see a high target share. So in that sense, it's a great landing spot. There's a chance he was going to end up in Buffalo or Kansas City. Like the ultimate landing spot would have been the Chiefs. So that's probably why his ADP was this high. That was in the range of outcomes. But right now he fell down to wide receiver 28 for me, just because, like I said, they're going to be run heavy team. He's going to be 31. So, he's at the tail end of his career. And, I view him more as a high end wide receiver 3 option because he does rely on volume. Like he needs a lot of catches to produce fantasy points. Whereas a guy like AJ Brown in this offense was able to post solid wide receiver 2 numbers thanks to just ridiculous efficiency. That's not really Hopkins' game. So that's why I think he gets a downgrade by the landing spot. There's a chance Will Levis could be under center at some point. That would hurt Hopkins. But the ripple effect from this was massive because, it certainly dings, Treylon Burks, unfortunately Chigga Kwankwo's stock a bit. Ryan Tannehill's stock is up. And then other teams, like I thought he was going to the Patriots. So I had like Juju Smith-Schuster's, projections were way down. Those go up. So it's a boost for Juju. I thought he was going to the Patriots. So I had Mac Jones, with a little bit of a boost. So Mac Jones stock takes a bit of a drop. So just this signing had a massive effect to everyone's ADP. So, like a guy like Juju might be offering value now, but this was just a massive landing spot just in terms of, I didn't see it coming. But I have him as wide receiver 28. I think this is too high. I think his ADP will drop. I think the market will adjust down, and I think he ends up in that wide receiver 24 to 28 range.
Yeah, I have him wide receiver 27. So I'm right in line with you. And, I think he's another guy. I think people are kind of overstating his demise a little bit just because when you look at his underlying metrics, last year, he's still targeted on 26% of his routes, which is very, very good. So, he's like, he should still, when he's on the field, he's still getting open, and he doesn't really even need to be open because he's a great kind of, contested catch receiver. But, it's been more so the missed games over the last couple of years than anything underlying. So yeah, I'm not going to ding him too much, but I do agree. I think 21 is a bit high. We're kind of treating him as if, it's kind of, there's just a little more certainty than there probably is. Anytime a wide receiver switches teams, I think, there are some question marks, and he's a little bit older, and we know the Titans are where these wide receivers go to die too.
He's gonna say Julio,
Randy Moss. Who else was it?
Josh Gordon,
Robert Woods.
Yeah, seriously. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So it's he's not out of the woods yet. So I think this is a little bit high. I think they're probably but at the same time, like you said, there's not many places he was going to go and be the unquestioned number one. I think he should be here in Tennessee. DJ Moore is the wide receiver 22. He is entering year 6. He's only it's only going to be his age 26 season. How do you think the move to Chicago affects him?
There's no question he's going to make this offense and Justin Fields better. I mean, we saw this, with Stephon Diggs going to Buffalo. That really, boosted Josh Allen's career. Last year with AJ Brown really, took Jalen Hurts to the next level. I don't think it'll be that level, but I think that this is really going to elevate Justin Fields and the Bears. But I still think, this is a bit too high for DJ Moore specifically. He should still see a high target share. Like he's going to be the unquestioned number one target in this offense. But just the Bears, it's not a great passing environment still, even with DJ Moore there. They ranked dead last in pass rate over expected last year. Justin Fields led the league in scramble rate and sack rate by a large margin. And those are the two types of plays that result in lost pass attempts, as I like to call them, which hurts the passing game even more. Now, having DJ Moore will help all three of those areas probably significantly. But the Bears are still going to be a run-heavy team. Fields will still scramble a ton and probably take a high number of sacks as well. So overall, this hurts DJ Moore's fantasy value. Not to mention there's probably not going to be that many passing touchdowns to go around either. But, he will still be fine, but I consider more of a mid-range wide receiver 3, to be honest. And
really?
Like I did the projections, and I'm really boosting Justin Fields as much as I can, and he's still in that range because Cole Kmet's still gonna be a factor. Darnell Mooney is probably better off as being a number 2 wide receiver. So I think Moore is going to be consistent at least, but it's hard to see him putting up numbers much higher than this.
Yeah, I actually have him in line with ADP here. I think the Bears are going to regress quite a bit in terms of their passing volume, because over the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, I mean, they just did not throw the ball like at all.
It was ugly.
Yeah, and then they started to throw more over the second half, and I think, and, remember they had guys hurt, so like Mooney was out of the lineup for a good stretch in the second half of the season, and Claypool never really got fully healthy or integrated in the offense, so I do think you're going to see a more normal amount of pass attempts for Fields, and just kind of looking back more recently at the guys in this similar situation, I think there's been concerns about Stephon Diggs that first year in Buffalo. There was concerns about AJ Brown to a certain extent, even that first year in Philly. And you look at those guys and how they kind of progressed in what they were able to do. And I think DJ Moore is in that same kind of talent tier, and he's never really had good quarterbacks in his life. So I mean, he's always been a pretty productive receiver, never really had great quarterbacks. Last year, I think he just kind of bottomed out in terms of the quarterback situation. So I actually have him kind of in this range. I do think there's a lot of room to grow for Chicago. But even if they kind of do what I expect on the median, I think he should he should actually get here. So yeah, I'm a little higher on DJ here. He's still in that group of receivers that I'm still feeling better about than the running backs. Terry McLaurin, he is the wide receiver 23. He is entering year 5, 28 years old. Has been pretty consistent his entire career, but never hasn't really kind of had that monster season that I think he's capable of. But this is another year where it doesn't look like he's probably going to have it, because I mean, you're talking about Brissett and Sam Howell splitting the quarterback duties. So I'm kind of in line with ADP. What about you?
Yeah, same. And he's the type of receiver who's better in real life than fantasy, just because he typically gets held back just due to horrible QB play. And he was wide receiver 14 last year, despite the Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke disaster. Not that Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett means he will be a top 10 receiver this year. But it is worth pointing out that Heineke at least seemed willing to pepper McLaurin with a ton of targets. He had a 28% target rate in the Heineke games and only a 16% target rate in the Carson Wentz Sam Howell game. So that's a bit of a concern. And, I'm guessing they give Sam Howell a fairly long leash to start the year. If he does struggle, at least they have Jacoby Brissett as the backup. I think that helps Terry McLaurin's, floor this season. At worst, he'll have Jacoby Brissett, which is nice to have. So yeah, the wide receiver 2 range sounds about right. I mean, he has the potential to be a wide receiver 1, but I don't think either of these quarterbacks will give that to him this year. So it's the same old story with Terry McLaurin, where he's a low end wide receiver 2, despite being, one of the more talented wide receivers in the game.
Yeah. And that's pretty much exactly where he finished in terms of the points per game. He was, I believe 21st in half PPR and 26th in PPR points per game last year. So, you kind of looking at him right in this range. And I don't see massive downside. I don't see massive upside, just given the quarterback situation either. And then Christian Watson, he closes out the wide receiver 2 tier. He's the number 24 receiver in terms of ADP. I really liked what he was able to do. I mean, he showed explosiveness after the catch. He got targeted on 24% of his routes. So that's very good. So, I mean, guys usually take a leap entering year 2. Now the question mark is, Jordan Love. So how do you kind of factor, the potential breakout or leap with the Jordan Love factor?
Yeah, well, Watson's certainly talented enough to overcome, the drop off from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. And to be fair, it's not like Rodgers was playing, too of a high level last year. I think when it comes to Watson, it's really going to come down to his health. If he can stay healthy, I think he can beat this ADP, but last year was a concern. He was in and out of the lineup constantly. And he dealt with some miscues in his rookie season. But he was the wide receiver 2 weeks 10 through 13. Over that stretch, he actually caught a 63-yard touchdown from Jordan Love, where he did all the work. So again, that kind of helps me, project him to overcome a pretty big drop off in quarterback. Is he's able to generate a lot of yards after the catch. They also started just giving him design rush attempts. So I think we could see him get, 1 to 3 carries a game, maybe around the goal line. I think they're going to come up with ways to get him the ball. He'll be the unquestioned number 1 target in this offense. So he has a lot of things going for him. It just, will he stay healthy? And just because a guy has a bunch of injuries year one doesn't mean you can label him as a, injury risk. So I do like his upside, at least at wide receiver 24. Even though the quarterback play could be a drop off, although we don't really know. We haven't seen Jordan Love play that much. But he's had enough time behind Rodgers and knows the offense. He could surprise people this season. So I think Watson, in this range sounds about right.
Yeah, and also there's just not really many other guys on the Packers that are going to command a target share. So when you see a guy 24% targets per route in year one, guys usually make a leap in year two. Yeah, I just, I think the targets are going to be there. We've seen the explosiveness. So yeah, I mean, there could be a little bit wider range of outcomes. Maybe he could put up some duds. But again, that's why we're kind of talking about getting as many of these guys as you can, because I think you could say that about a lot of the guys after him as well. I mean, Drake London, we'll talk about the next pod, but he's the 25 and he's kind of in a similar situation, should see a high target rate, but you could see a few duds from him as well. So yeah, I mean, given the tape that we saw from Watson, I'm still taking him here. I still like him here. But yeah, this kind of, it just goes to show how the wide receiver tier, in terms of the guys that you can really, peg for a high floor, it starts to deteriorate once you get to the end of this wide receiver 2 tier. So love the upside for Watson. And, because the floors are deteriorating here, I mean, now you are starting to draft for more upside. So I think it still makes a lot of sense. Watson should still be a top 25 receiver, and there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, maybe the Green Bay Packers aren't very good and they have to throw even more than last year. And again, there's him and Dobbs. So,
yep.
All right. That is going to wrap it up for our wide receiver 2 pod. Just to recap, who are you high on in this tier?
The guys I'm high on would be like Keenan Allen for where he's going. Draft him at range. I do like Amari Cooper for similar reasons. I think he has a high floor, high ceiling range of outcomes. And just really anybody in this range. There's not too many guys I would necessarily avoid. Even DJ Moore, I think in the right spots, even though I'm a bit lower. You could take him, especially in best ball with Justin Fields stacks. But at the end of the day, it's critical to have, I think, 3 wide receivers once this tier is off the board.
Yep.
So I think that's why I'm not being too picky. I mean, I could poke holes in all these receivers, but at the end of the day, the position really drops off. So I think it's critical to have 3 before this tier evaporates.
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking all these guys over like the equivalent running backs. Really, the only guy I think should be like a couple spots higher is Keenan Allen, but everyone else, I mean, Deebo I'm a little bit lower on. Hopkins I'm lower on.
Yeah, Hopkins for sure.
And Jeudy a little lower on, but that's kind of within the tier. I'm still taking them over the running backs. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this. But that's going to wrap it up for our wide receiver 2 episode here on the Fantasy Flex. If you missed them, we got our running back episodes, our wide receiver 1 episode, and our tight end episode out already. We'll have the wide receiver 3 episode out later this week, so be sure to check that out. Also, our fantasy rankings are up at actionnetwork.com, so you can check those out as well. Sean is on Twitter at @_oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon, and we're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.